Hello everyone and welcome to this Austmine webinar. I'm Sheldon Varco, Membership Manager here at Austmine, and I'm pleased to host you for today's session on Canada mining updates from Ontario. Now before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this webinar from the lands of the Gadigal people. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples attending this webinar. Ontario, Canada is home to some of the most mineral-rich deposits in the world and boasts a competitive business climate, world-class talent, and a great track record of innovation. The operating landscape and industry environment aligns well with Australia, meaning that our MET sector is well positioned to form relationships, find partners, and create growth avenues in the market. For today's webinar, it will provide the latest information on the Ontario and the Canadian market, and key insights into the supply needs, mining innovation landscape, local partners, collaborators, and more. We'll begin with a presentation from Luke Mahoney, Global Head of Technology and Low Carbon Program Leader at Vale Base Metals, on the future of mining and also how collaboration is driving a shift to a sustainable future. Next slide, please. We'll then be joined by Don Duval, CEO of Norcat, at the Underground Centre in Sudbury, Ontario, who will discuss the pathway for Australian companies to find partnerships in Canada and the role that Norcat can play in driving technology forward. Finally, Todd Steen, Operations Manager at Hatch, will take a look at some of their key projects in Canada and the trends they've seen when carrying out this work. There will then be an opportunity for audience Q&A. You can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to send your questions over at any time. I definitely encourage you to utilize this opportunity as we have three great speakers on the panel today. So without further ado, I'd now like to hand over to Luke to kick things off for us. Welcome, Luke.
Okay, thank you. Just to confirm, you can hear me well?
Perfect, loud and clear.
Okay, excellent. No, as mentioned, my name's Luke Mahoney. I'm an Australian living in Canada. I've been here for 3 years, with Vale for 8 years. And here I get to talk to you about Vale Base Metals. I'll introduce what Vale Base Metals is and give an update on some of the work that we're doing and how we're seeing technology in Canada, but very much applicable to the global mining industry. Next slide, please. And next slide. And just to start, it's an important one pager that we do go through internally, but it's also important and external. When you engage with Vale, we really look at the one pager. And one of the key aspects is the lever of innovation. And that's such a critical lever that's part of what we do and the key part of how we achieve our ambitions. And it's important to be aware when you do engage with mining companies and even suppliers and other companies to understand what drives that company, what's the purpose, what are their levers, because it's a way where you can really start to connect with different companies, Vale no exception. Next slide. So Vale is, as everyone may be aware, it's a global mining company. A lot of assets, primarily in iron ore, but it's one of the largest producers iron ore, pellets, and nickel. If we go to the next one, and very much globally focused, a lot of operations, integrated operations, research areas, projects, and offices around the world. Base Metals specifically is headquartered in Toronto, and we've got assets and operations and refineries throughout Canada, Brazil, Indonesia, the UK, and Japan. Next slide, please. And so just to give you a feel of some of the assets when we do talk Vale Base Metals, and so very much nickel, copper focus, but we also have platinum minerals, gold, and a few other precious metals, a lot of resources around the world. And this is the challenge. I think you'll see the theme of a lot of resource potential, a lot of demand from the market, especially when we move into the new EV revolution and the green environment that really leverages off the products, these critical minerals, nickel for the batteries, but also for premium plating and also the copper. And so we've got a great source of assets It's just about using technology, and we'll talk about this a bit more, to bring the costs down, to increase our productivity, and to do it in a safe and sustainable way. And so portfolio around Canada, Brazil, and Indonesia, as previously discussed. If we go to the next slide, and I'll start my presentation when we start thinking about how's technology shaping the future of mining. And technology has always been there, and I think the mining industry has really excelled. It's in a lot of areas. And I'm seeing that there's 4 emerging themes in how technology is really shaping the future of mining. And I'll touch on the 4 of them, which is about optimizing today, thinking differently, managing the showstoppers, and changing our DNA and mindset about technology. And each one of these, I'll talk about how we think about that, but also how's it relevant to suppliers? Because I know this is focused on suppliers with the Austmine, and how can they interact and really integrate with these points? If we go to the next slide, please. So when I talk about optimizing today is enhancing what we currently do. It's about knowing what's knowable. And this is where you really want to connect to the environment. And this is where we can get benefits of lifting recoveries, improving throughput, reliability, and reducing energy consumption. The predictive maintenance and reliability is such a key aspect, and it's really how you measure. Measure this real time, second by second, noise, vibration, temperature, coupling that with live production data, and you can really get a real time view of how the plant's working. And with this, you start looking at productivity and performance improvements. And this is where you really start to learn about, okay, what decisions am I making, at what point in time, and what's the outcome? And when you start to integrate these, you can really start to understand where are the opportunities or risks for that particular way that the mine's set up or that process is set up. And it's critical to really understand. We are now managing like the Internet of Things and getting access to data, but it's how we utilize that. I know we've got a long way to go. And then finally, modeling and scenario planning. It's about really trying to predict the unknowns and being able to predict the future and to take that information and start to use that moving forward. And so when we start thinking about, I engage a lot with different suppliers, and it's fascinating to see where technology is moving and where the opportunities are. A big point there is help the mining companies understand the problem. Don't just come with the solutions. Too often, and probably 2/3 of my meetings, it's a solution based. And for me, it's really being clear and trying to understand what the problem is with the mining company, because it does really distract you when it's really a solution focus. Next slide, please. When we start talking about thinking differently, it's about, now that where technology and innovation has started to excel and we're starting to see a lot of changes into what's available, we need to start to rethink how we mine. And this is the ability to design, simulate, and model these complex interactions. And this is when we start thinking about creating value-added virtual twins. And this is the real-time virtual representation of a product, process, or system that we can model, visualize, predict, and provide feedback on, one, how we've gone in the past or how we'll go in the future. Next, we need to start thinking about how can we extract the minerals by minimizing the waste? How can we just target that bit of metal? Because we spend so much effort to mine that ore, and then we throw 99% of it away, and that goes into tailings dams, which creates a risk. And so we need to start thinking about how can we minimize that footprint, get more productive. Bigger was always better in the past, but for me, it's really how do we do what's the right size? And for me, I'm seeing more and more examples of going smaller is the right way to go, especially now that technology is enabling that to happen. Bringing to life the science fiction of yesterday, we're now talking about biomining, bioremediation, using bugs to accelerate the oxidation process to extract minerals out of dams and areas that we did not know. There's technology in terms of leaching, which then gets access to ore that was thrown away in the past. And we're starting to see these different types of sciences and extraction come to life. And so this is quite exciting, and it's something that I know Vale we're starting to collaborate on, but also the mining industry, where we're starting to look at and leverage off learnings from other industries, be it oil and gas, and starting to bring that home. And then finally, the value of decarbonizing the business. If you chase the carbon, you chase the money. And if you start thinking in a sustainable way, yeah, naturally, it's more expensive. But when you start to really think about energy use and opportunities and start looking outside the boundaries, there are huge opportunities there. We will decarbonize. We need to move into that direction. It's just a matter of how, and it's just a matter of when. But we are going to chase it. Society demands it, as well as our internal goals. And so decarbonization is profitable, and it will be profitable. So it's just a matter of how we really partner up to accelerate that, especially to get the scale and speed that companies like Vale and others are announcing to the market. If we go to the next slide, please. Another important aspect that generally we hear about, but we do forget, it's really about managing the showstoppers. And a big part of this is building trust. And this is trust internally and externally. And we talk topics such as tailings dams. In Canada, we have a lot of seismicity, safety, ESG. It's very much a foundational in how we need to move forward. The transparency in this is foundational. And this is a huge opportunity for the mining industry. We have to gain that trust. We have to gain that trust with society, with industry, with governments, with ourselves. And ultimately what we're doing, we're seeking permission to transform. We've got a lot of legacies in the past, and it's about how we move beyond those to enable that future that we know is essential. And we do need to seek that permission to transform. And then for the suppliers in the bottom box, some of the smallest initiatives, they have the biggest impact. And so managing risk, managing tailings, managing ESG, yes, it mightn't be direct to extract the minerals, but that's what we need to really move and get that permission to transform. And so very critical to how we want to move forward in the future. If we go to the next slide, and this is where we need to start to change our DNA and mindset about technology. I'm talking about mining companies here. And foundational, what we did yesterday in terms of the business model cannot be the model for the mining company of tomorrow. And so in the past, I know all companies and mining companies want to be technology companies, but they don't need to be technology companies. We need to be aware of what technology is out there. We need to get really good at collaboration. And then we need the hubs to enable others to execute. And so we need to think about what do we need to do to change the mindset to bring technology to life. And it's really moving to a technology co-development approach and co-deployment. And so a big part of this is software and technology doesn't need to be a core competency. And I think in the past, a lot of companies saw that as a competitive advantage, where today it's about how we collaborate and work together. It's really finding those companies that are great at startups, great at technology, great at their niche area, and even mining companies working together, be it a co-investment in a corporate venture capital or venture capital, be it a collaboration where we use different consortiums or a direct engagement. We're happy to do that as a mining company. We don't necessarily see the competitive advantage in this, because for me, it's how we extract that resource, lowest cost, safe, sustainable. And so it's about collaborating, enable others to enable us. And so it's not a department or an area in the business, but it's only successful with an integration. And so we're learning a lot. We're learning from other industries. We want to, and we need to partner differently. And so we don't just want to see your catalog. We want to understand where your thoughts are. We want companies to challenge us in how we need to partner. And everything's open. We've now changed our mindset in terms of how we partner, how we both put skin in the game, how we can de-risk or accelerate different technologies. We will bet on technology. We will hedge against different technology. And for me, it's how we really find the like-minded suppliers, OEMs, and other technology companies, plus consortiums, collabs, and other opportunities that we'll hear about later. How do we leverage those to really accelerate it? Not just for companies like Vale, but for the industry. And I think that's my final slide. If we go to the next one. So yeah, in summary, the 4 key points, how I'm seeing technology: optimize today, know what can be known, collect that data and use it to make better decisions. Think differently. Technology has enabled us to find a better way to extract minerals and to process minerals in a more sustainable way. We must manage the showstoppers. It's about trust and permission for us to move forward. And then changing the DNA and mindset about technology. It's about enabling others to enable us. And for me, I think they're the 4 key themes in where I'm seeing technology move in the future. And if we go to the next slide, that should be it. Okay, thank you, Sheldon. That's my presentation.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for that, Luke. Fascinating presentation there, and really appreciate you providing those insights into the thoughts of yourself and Vale around the future of mining and where I guess the technology and sustainability roadmaps are leading us. Really, in a couple of great insights there around suppliers. So when suppliers are approaching mining organizations to focus on solving those problems, not just putting forward a solution. So that's a great piece of advice. And also, it's exciting to see that co-develop and collaboration model. A lot of parallels there with the Australian market. So I'm sure that's a landscape that a lot of the suppliers in the room today can find relevancy from and the way they're approaching their business. So thanks a lot for that. If anyone has any questions for Luke, please just pop those through the Q&A box and we'll address those at the end of the session. So moving on now to next slide, please. I'd like to introduce Don Duval. Don is the CEO of Norcat, and he's going to talk about the Underground Centre and how they're helping to shape the future of mining as well. Thanks, Don.
Great. And Sheldon, you can hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and good morning to those in Australia. And the other, I guess, good news associated with this is I think I'm very much aligned to Luke's presentation, so it should be helpful for all those watching. If we can move to the next slide, just a bit of a preamble for those who might not be familiar with Norcat. I'm the CEO of the Norcat group of companies, and as an organization, we're really guided by 5 what we call aspirational priorities. Given the focus of today, I'm really going to focus on Norcat's role to serve as this global one-stop shop for all that is the future of technology, mining technology and innovation. But just let it be known for those who might be generally familiar that yes, we do have a training and development division, we have a venture capital group, we have an advisory group, we have commercial real estate, we have 7 locations around the world. But as it presents to today's topic, I'm really going to focus on our role really to help drive and expedite technology adoption in the global mining industry. If you move to the next slide, what makes us quite unique as a region, first and foremost, just for the benefit of the Austmine members, I just wanted to paint a picture of the materiality of the Northern Ontario mining market, in which I reside, and Vale has some pretty meaningful operations as well. But just in Northern Ontario alone, which you can see on that map, and I'm currently talking to you from Sudbury, Ontario, so you can see proportional where we are relative to Toronto. Northern Ontario's mining supply service sector is big. It's one of the biggest in the world. Pretty meaningful employment, pretty meaningful contribution to GDP, fast approaching close to 1,000 companies that supply, be it services or technology, to the mining industry. We have meaningful existing production scale mines, a huge amount of activity currently underway. And, you know, kind of aligning to the earlier presentations, we have a strong ecosystem and culture that aligns the buyers and the sellers to collaborate, to work together to solve intractable issues facing not only the Northern Ontarian, but also the global mining industry. So I just want to give you a bit of context in terms of the ecosystem of which I'm speaking to you about today more specifically. If you move to the next slide, as I mentioned, our role as an innovation center is really quite unique, and unique in the sense that we are the only nonprofit innovation center in the world that actually owns and operates an underground mine. Now, the primary purpose of this asset is not production, although we still drill, blast, muck when we have an offtake agreement with a large mining company to procure the ore body. But the primary purpose of this asset is to be a place to enable startups, be they, you know, big or small, domestic or international, a place where they can do development testing, so kind of the proverbial R&D part of product development. And once the intellectual property has been sorted and protected, we can become an extension of a tech company's demonstration, showcasing mandate, really to drive business development and sales. So, you know, very often we've referred to it as the underground center. In many instances, many people think of it as a bit of an active laboratory where every month, every quarter, we have various tech companies from around the world either demonstrating, installing, and or testing emerging technologies that these companies believe are poised to transform the industry. And I start with this slide because a lot of the insight that I'm going to share with you today is based on our primary research of engaging and kind of having a really good pulse on both the buy side and the sell side as it pertains to the tech ecosystem in mining. So as a segue to the next slide, you know, why do we do what we do? And if you can slip to the next slide, why do we do what we do? So we embarked on a fairly rigorous study rooted in a survey, the better part of almost 10 years ago now, really trying to understand a lot of the, I'll call it conjecture in the marketplace back then, whereby a popular opinion was the global mining industry has an innovation problem. And so we sought to engage, I think, close to 200 to 250 companies, both on the mining side and the technology side, trying to validate that hypothesis. And what we discovered, 8 or 9 years ago was, the mining industry doesn't have an innovation problem. It has a technology adoption problem. And when we spoke to, the sell side, the tech side, the feedback they were getting as to, why can't we expedite, market traction of our product in the mining industry? The feedback that we got from them was almost the same when we asked the same questions to the buy side, the mining companies, whereby in order to get your market adopted, you need to, have a meaningful story. You need to have a demonstrable marketing or a narrative where you can actually point to somewhere where it's been installed to de-risk it operationally to potentially enhance a procurement decision by said mining company. And you can envision, that becomes a little bit challenging, especially in smaller companies that have limited brand awareness. They don't have a long list of deployments, so how do you expedite technology adoption and sales if you're a company of, limited experience, limited brand eminence in the mining industry, where it's difficult to validate that, you have a meaningful credential. So part of the rationale for our continued investments in our underground mine is we provide that all-important first reference customer for about 70% of the tech companies that come to us. Now, it can be a reference customer in the form of a new product. So the likes of, the Bort Longears, the Sandviks, the Epirocs will use us for a new product introduction, all the way through to angel and venture-backed startups looking to get their first meaningful reference in an operating mine, not a football field, not a laboratory, not a parking lot, because the mining side, the buy side, wants to know that they can de-risk that technology operationally before they deploy it. So we became quite a kind of a unique, interesting environment in the global mines, global landscape, and that we provide that meaningful reference site. If you flip to the next slide, just a bit of context here. One of the things I think is really important for the supply side, especially those in foreign jurisdictions to Canada. So liken it to yourselves watching right now in Australia, And it's very much aligned to the earlier presentation whereby, if there was 3 pieces of advice that I could share with you based on our unique perch at the underground center to watch the dynamic and interaction between supply service companies from different jurisdictions and would-be potential buyers from the mining jurisdiction in Canada, there's really kind of 3 things that we very often see. The first one is there needs to be a meaningful narrative that you understand the problem to solve and how your technology will address that through a clearly defined, value proposition. And any claims that you're making, be they from in-field experience or at this stage, if they're only in the laboratory or early stage product development, there needs to be clarity that here is the problem and here's how we directly solve that. And in many instances, we see a lot of companies with a solution chasing a problem. And to Luke's earlier comment, the mining companies are inundated with tech companies with limited brand evidence in the marketplace trying to sell them stuff. And when I say inundated, it's multiple calls a day if you were to sit in a operations manager with any large mining company in Canada. So there needs to be a real clear story value proposition, hopefully with a demonstrable reference customer already in the wings that can at least elevate the sophistication of that interaction. The second thing, and maybe not akin to the Canadian mining market, but something that we see more and more, if you are confident in your solution to sell into the Canadian mining marketplace, be prepared to invest your own time and money to do an installation and a demonstration of your product, potentially for free, to validate the proof of concept within the specific working environment of that mine. The supplementary to that, some pilots are paid, some are not, as I made mention. But what I will say is that as part of that negotiated, proof of concept validation that it works, something to think about that we see more and more often is a creative follow-on sales strategy whereby if it does work, what would be the preferred pricing of that supplementary sale? Would there be a negotiated benefit if that they're giving you an opportunity to demonstrate a proof of concept for free, it works 6 to 9 months later, there would be an expectation that there would be a meaningful opportunity or essentially a good deal to move that whole process forward. So that notion of being prepared to invest the time, effort, potentially money to do an installation, to do a demonstration within the working environment, potentially for free, is critically important. And within, and then clearly defining if it works, what the next steps would be. And then the last one is on-site engagements. Over the last, I would say 6 months, as the pandemic is seemingly starting to wane, we've had a lot of discussions with supply service companies, be they from Europe, Latin America, and or Australia, looking to get their first customer sale in the Canadian marketplace by immediately reverting to distributors or licensees. And what I can tell you, again, based on our primary research, there is an expectation with mining companies that they will have a chance to directly interact with that individual or individuals who have intimate product knowledge as to how this will work. So short of getting on a plane, I can't put it any more clear. There is a high touch expectation that selling out of the gate directly, based on the nuances of your product, going directly through a distributor or licensee, sometimes can be a bit exhausting for the would-be buyer. So those insights, again, are gathered directly from our primary research. They evolve over time, but in the last 6 months, we've gotten some fairly meaningful feedback to suggest that this is something to pay attention to. If you can flip to the next slide, Sheldon. In terms of the type of work that we do at the Underground Center, you can see at the top of the slide there's a whole array of different tech projects that we support. The materiality of our facility is I think something that we're probably the most proud of. Save for the last 2 years, we historically would have about 1 global mining company per week sending a delegation to us with the expectation of either getting a pulse on what's next. So envision walking the proverbial underground hallways, almost like a gallery tour, stopping every 20, 30 feet, looking at some emerging tech. The entrepreneur or the CEO or representatives of the company would be there potentially to speak about it in more detail. but the materiality, the buy side, makes it a vibrant innovation hub. And concurrent to that, on the sell side, the tech side, we have about, I would say, anywhere between, it's 35 to 40 right now. We're trying to rebuild the momentum that we had pre-pandemic, but it does create a fairly vibrant ecosystem cluster where both the buy side and the sell side come together. The key thing at the top, there's a whole array of projects. Something that I will share, again, based on primary research, the key themes, if I can use that term, that we've seen bubbling to the surface of late, of interest by mining companies, and most recently a large delegation from Codelco and a few other Latin American companies. If you are working on technology related to electrification, autonomous systems, telemetry, gathering data analytics on mobile equipment, including collision avoidance, integrated ops, a few other pieces, and or resiliency around communication infrastructure, be it 5G, LTE, other types of communication. I would say in the last 6 months, we've seen a significant amount of interest in those themes. And when I say for the likes of, as an example around electrification, again, building on Luke's earlier comment, we've actually seen a handful of mining companies coming to us seeking the gradual migration electrification is pushing them to evaluate methods to optimize the existing diesel assets that they have to ensure that they might be able to prolong their life by another 5, 7, 10 years as they continue towards the migration to a battery electric fleet. So of late, we've seen a handful of companies that are doing just that. How to optimize, diesel equipment, how to reduce emissions, how a whole variety of different technologies that do have a defined life expectancy given the broader transition, but something to think about. And I can give a whole array of examples if there's interest afterward. If you can flip to the next slide, please. This just gives you a pulse on the amount of, I guess, the volume, the diversity, be it geographic and or scope and scale, size of the companies that we serve at the NORCAD Underground Center. And again, we're quite proud of the differentiation that a lot of our insights and research is essentially just listening and watching the interaction between both the buy side and the sell side. You flip to the next one, please. This is a visualization. We have we've had a handful of discussions with supply service tech companies from the Australian market trying to visualize what our mine looks like. This just gives you a representation of our facility in the city of Greater Sudbury. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll conclude here. And this is something that we're actually working with Austmine on. That in September of this year, so I guess 4.5, 5 months from now, we're hosting the world's first technology exhibition in an underground mine. And the intent of this really is a transactional event and also somewhat of an awareness building event to bring together both the buy side and the sell side in an operating a mine environment to actually demonstrate live technologies, products of a whole array of tech companies. And again, part of the rationale for doing this is the demand of both the buy and the sell side to have a place where they can see this, again, not in a laboratory, not in a parking lot, in an operating mine environment. But also, I just want to share, a final thought that I think should create a huge sense of optimism for the supply service industry globally. The global mining industry over the last 30, 40 years has undergone a gradual divestiture of in-house R&D, whereby historically a lot of global mining companies prided themselves on these, engineers and scientists that they locked away with the mandate of, innovate and develop differentiated products that will make our mine more competitive, and more productive and more safe. That model has gradually declined, whereby the global mining industry has now divested those types of assets and become more of an outsourced innovation model. But there's still meaningful and intractable issues that need to be solved. So what that has done is almost concurrent to the in-house divestiture of R&D resources. It's given rise to a vibrant and growing supply service industry. So as I highlighted in that opening slide, the growth in the supply service tech ecosystem, selling products and services into the global mining industry, and Sudbury alone has nearly quadrupled over the last 15 years. So concurrent to that, if you were to, ask yourself, to further validate this, 10 years ago, name, 5 venture capital or private equity firms that focused on investing in tech selling into the mining industry. You'd be hard pressed to do so. Maybe Jollymont or Resource Capital Funds in Australia. Beyond that, I'm not sure I could name anything that was meaningful. What I can tell you today, in Canada alone, we have close to $500 million of VC private equity funds looking to invest in emerging tech companies that are building products and services primarily to sell into the mining industry. Part of the rationale for that is there's now a meaningful path to market because the buy side, the mining industry, has recognized that to maintain their shareholder value, their competitiveness, their safety, they have to buy. And they're becoming more sophisticated on how they evaluate, how they adopt, how they deploy these emerging technologies, such as those aforementioned insights I shared earlier around, if you want to gain traction, be prepared to get on a plane, be prepared to invest in an install proof of concept to demonstrate how it works, be prepared to have preferred pricing or preferred arrangement after the POC development period, and know concurrently that if you're looking to build a larger scalable business faster, there's now meaningful pools of capital that will enable you to do that. So it is an unbelievably exciting time. Our business is driven by, the transactions between buyers and sellers, and we're the busiest we've been in 10 years as we come out of the pandemic. So I'll leave it there. In summary, a bit of a highlights of the ecosystem in which I operate, a bit of insights into the role of the NORCAD Underground Center, some of the, influencers around the buy side and things that I would encourage all tech suppliers, service companies to think about, and just a picture of a unique event. If there's interest, I'm happy to talk more about it. So thank you for your time. Hopefully you found it somewhat interesting. I think that was my 15 minutes bang on, and I look forward to any questions.
Great. Thanks a lot for that, Don. Great to touch on that point at the end there about mining companies increasingly outsourcing the technology development. And it's our belief that they're really outsourcing it to the companies in the met sector that have the capabilities, the time, the energy, the resources to invest in it. So it's pleasing to see that happening in Canada as well. And thanks a lot just for your ongoing support and collaboration with Austmine. We very much look forward to bringing our trade delegation to Canada later in the year and participating in the underground exhibition. So thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you.
Moving on now to our final presentation before we have some audience Q&A after that. I'd like to welcome Todd Steen, Operations Manager from Hatch. And Todd's going to take a look at some of the projects they're doing across Canada. So welcome, Todd.
Thanks, Sheldon. I appreciate it. So I'm Todd Steen. I think this webinar was titled Mining in Ontario, but I'm actually coming to you from a couple provinces west of there, over in Saskatchewan, where we also have a lot of mining activity. And in fact, that's where some of Hatch's biggest projects are taking place right now. And so you'll hear some of the same things from me that you heard from Luke and Don, and you probably touch on a couple similar points. But I'll do it in a little bit of a different way. I'm going to run through a few of the biggest projects in Canada that we're working on right now, and one that we've just recently completed, and give you a sense of maybe in some of those cases what the clients, what our partners have found important, and what we've been focused on those projects. So I'm the operations manager for our Saskatoon office for Hatch. So we've got about 120 people here, and also a long-term mining industry person. I've been mostly on kind of the soft rock side, a lot of my career in potash and coal and phosphate, and now with Hatch, so for the last 5 years. So next slide. If you haven't heard of us, next one actually. We're a global EPCM firm, or engineering, procurement, construction management, and we're employee owned. It's something we're quite proud of, and we think that really kind of ratchets up our level of ownership, both in our success, but also our clients' success. We've got over 9,000 employees worldwide. I know this is an Australian crowd here. We do of course have a heavy presence in Australia as well. My presentation obviously is going to come more from a Canadian perspective. but we've been around for over 60 years now as well. So next slide. Offices around the world, and you see some of the main locations there, headquartered in Mississauga, large mining office and mining presence in our Sudbury office. That's where a lot of our folks are that deliver on a lot of our mining projects, especially in Canada. So hoist shafts, head frames, underground infrastructure, the whole works. A big team of folks that do that in Sudbury, but also, you know, some in Saskatchewan here, as well as Mississauga and other offices in Canada. And of course, you can see the other locations around the world there in front of you as well. Next slide. Our business, you know, Hatch kind of plays in three main areas, and my focus today will be on the metals area, which is where our mining practice lies. But we work across metals, energy, as well as infrastructure, as kind of our three main business units. And then, as you can sort of see in the graphic there, woven through those are a lot of the practices that we have that sort of cut across all three of those business units. And you know, some of the stuff that Luke touched on there and that Don touched on includes areas that Hatch works in, such as digital and technologies, environmental services, climate change. And so you'll hear some of those things as we go here as well, as I go through the few projects. So jump ahead, please. So I'm just going to run through 5 of our projects in Canada here right now, and so probably 2 minutes each, so I'm not going to get too deep into any of them. Obviously we don't have time for that, but again, just to give you a sense of some of the maybe interesting things about a few of our bigger projects right now. So next slide. First one up, and actually you can tell I'm from Saskatchewan, because I think the first 3 I'm going to hit here are all Saskatchewan projects. But the BHP's Jansen potash project is a huge project for us right now. We're really moving into the full execution of that project right now. Engineering has been ongoing for several years, but we're heavy out into the field now. We're in a joint venture on this one with Bantrel, and with Bantrel, we're the EPCM provider for the full stage 1 project. And in stage 1, BHP is aiming to have a mine that produces over 4 million tons of finished product per year, with ultimately an expansion plan or a multi-stage plan to ultimately produce over 16 million tons after the 4th stage of the project, which will come at some point in the future. Some of the areas BHP has been really focused on, digital project delivery, and so, you know, you hear about sort of that ability, and I'll just one example, right? The ability to have a tablet in the field, you know, come to a pump that's maybe down or it's failed, scan the barcode on that pump, immediately access all of that original design information, the single line diagrams for the area, the spare parts list, be able to look up the work order history all from the field, and be able to design this facility in such a way that that's all enabled and that's all possible. And so that's been a big focus of BHP's and of ours as we've gone through the engineering process. Been very focused on modularization. So that on this project, the shafts are sunk in their line now. Beginning to equip the shaft with the shaft infrastructure like power and piping and whatnot. And then underground development is going to begin right away. We're also converting the service shaft head frame, and I'm going to show you a couple slides on that, over to a production head frame, and installing temporary hoisting to support the initial mine development through the other shaft, which is on the left side of the picture you see there. Mill civil work is beginning this year as well. But really the critical path runs through the hoist and the mine. And BHP's aim here is to have the lowest cost potash mine in Saskatchewan. You know, another piece of that is their large and very highly productive and automated sand pick mining systems. So next slide. We'll go through these really quick. It's I sort of, like I say, tried to pick out a couple pictures and maybe graphics that just interested me. Hopefully they interest some of you as well. But I kind of like this one around modularization and just Really the plan here as we convert over from a sinker's head frame to the sinking head frame over to the production head frame here is essentially just roll some SPMTs or hydraulic moving systems in place, sort of detach the sinking head frame from the main body of the broader head frame. The next slide there. Roll that, make it sound really easy, but roll that right out of the way. And then next slide. Roll the production head frame in and the final head frame in and join it up, couple it up. Again, make it sound really easy. This is going to take some time, but the engineering that goes along with this and the work we've done with BHP here and on this will make this critical path piece significantly shorter than it would be if you were to stick dismantle and stick build the whole thing. So very much a schedule focus, trying to get this to production as soon as possible. So this is a key part of that. We'll flip to the next one. Again, small detail on each project. Won't go too far, but Next Gen Energy is a company that we're proud to be involved with on their Rook 1 uranium project in northern Saskatchewan. It's the Arrow deposit, and there's other deposits on this property, but that's the initial one that they're targeting. The next slide. So this one's in northern Saskatchewan, and is in the feasibility study was pegged to be about a $1.3 billion project, about an 11-year mine life, but will be permitted to handle some additional ore bodies that they plan to mine from the same shafts. Really looking and targeting best-in-class OpEx here, conventional mining methods, and one of the unique things here, I'll come to it in a second, is that the plan here is zero tailings on surface. It's all going to be brought back underground and deposited in stopes underground. Only the waste of rock stockpiles will be on surface. No mining waste there. No milling waste on surface at all. Next slide. So scope for this one, couple of, one main production shaft, also an exhaust shaft, purely for ventilation, really. And again, I won't go into all the detail here, but shafts need to freeze the ground in Saskatchewan to sink shafts. Don't need to freeze to do the mining itself. You can see a couple snaps of the surface plan or the surface layout and the shafts and the underground. And if you go to the next slide, again, this is one that if you're ever to listen to a Next Gen Energy investor presentation, you'd hear them talk about their underground tailings management facility as a real point of pride. Working closely with the local First Nations on this project and really finding ways to have as small of an environmental footprint as absolutely possible. One of those ways is to take the tailings off of surface and really get them back underground in the form of paste. And so, they're very, very unique. Haven't seen this anywhere else in the mines that we've dealt with. So, next one and the next project, Mosaic's K3 mine. So, Mosaic, again, we're back in the potash world here. Actually, just go to the next slide. I'll keep talking as I hit that. Mosaic started to look at creating a new mine in Esterhazy to replace their K1 and K2 mines, which had major water inflow issues many years ago. They engaged Hatch as their full EPCM again for that, for the shafts, head frames, the mine development, and all of the mine infrastructure. So all the initial conveyors, the loading pocket, everything associated with the initial mine pillar area. This one is both the head frames and shafts are fully commissioned now and in production, nearly up at full capacity. They're adding more boring machines as the mine development can handle them, and which is coming along really well. The next slide. One of the big highlights here, again, I talk a little bit about modularization, but we built the north shaft head frame first, and then took the learnings from that and built the south shaft head frame. And in the construction of the south shaft and the engineering of the south shaft head frame, really built it around an innovative jacking system where we had pre-assembled structural units that were brought in on the bottom floor and then jacked up into place up through the height of the head frame, and so shaved more than half off of the schedule for that project because of that constructability approach. And one of the themes we're seeing from companies is that they don't mind spending a little more time up front on and effort up front on engineering to shave some time off of the construction and ultimately shave time off the project. And that's what we achieved with Mosaic here. So it saved a nice chunk of cash and a good chunk of time on a unique approach to building that second head frame. So you can flip to the next one there. And yeah, just a few more pictures there of that jacking system and the way that floors were essentially brought into place at the bottom and then jacked all the way up to the top as we built it. So pretty interesting there. Next slide. We'll hit these ones quick. I know I'm running out of my time. So Boise's Bay mine expansion. So I should get Luke to do this one. This is his company, but this is a project we're doing with Ballet. And if you go to the next slide. Again, a bit about the scope here. This is an open pit mine that's almost exhausted and need to go underground to continue to extend the life of that operation. And so there's a couple of underground mines that are being developed. So the scope here involves expansion of the surface facilities. I won't read each one, but large paste plant and additional powerhouses and infrastructure. Underground infrastructure is significant. We have underground sizers, conveyor systems, rock breakers, dewatering, all the associated electrical infrastructure, and of course LTE these days. And you heard that mentioned by the previous presenters as well, and just that importance of communications and how that enables you to have that short interval control in your mines these days and enable that automation and all of that stuff. So, again, I think one of the messages here, and you'll see it with the next example or next project as well, is some of that easy ore is gone, right? And so companies are having to venture further underground. In some cases, convert to underground mines or go deeper in their underground mines. There's challenges with that, but at the same time, these companies want to see their costs maintained and still maintain that cost competitive site that they have always had, right? And so, how do you do that? Well, you have to get creative sometime with your construction. This one, again, looking at fleets, battery electric fleets, things like that. So. Next slide there. And really, these are just a couple pictures, and these are a couple months old, these slides here. I think I robbed them from another presentation, but just again, a little more detail on some of the work that was done in 2021. Again, LTE communications throughout the entire underground. And if we go to the next slide there, just some of what was forecasted to occur in 2022. The backfill system operational, installing conveyor at the Eastern Deeps mine and eventually first ore there. So in the interest of time, we'll keep cruising here. Go to the final one. And so last one on the list, next slide, the Onaping Depth Project. And so we'll go to the next slide there as well. Again, this one is a part of Glencore's portfolio here in the Sudbury integrated nickel operations. So again, this is one where we have an existing mine, the Craig mine, and then an internal winze to get at that deeper ore. So, some of the major things happening here, and winze and the associated head frames and hoists that go along with that, the lateral development for this new mine or the new area of the mine, underground refrigeration plant, new paste plant, all of those things. So next slide there. Yeah, I won't read through this. This was a bit about the status again a few months ago. You can see some of what's happening there around the winze, the head frame, the hoists, the surface infrastructure that's required. And so again, these same theme as before. Companies are having to go deeper, but are not, they're not willing to sacrifice that competitive cost profile that they have. And so we have to work with them to find ways to still make those competitive maximize efficiencies, enable that ability to run an efficient mine through technology, through digital technology, through communications, all those things. So next slide there. And that's just the off shaft development as well. So I'll go to the next one final slide here, and then I'll wrap up. So probably heard a few of these from me as I went, and hopefully there's a bit of insight. So what are we seeing out there? Well, high focus on safety and design, much more than ever, I would say, and in construction. So how can you avoid some of that stick building, modularized? It saves you time, but also improves the safety on these projects. Almost all the ones I just talked through, all of these companies are looking at heavily battery and electric fleets, and moving more and more away from the fully diesel fleets. Modularization has been a theme throughout them all. Digital project delivery, both on the engineering side, I would say, but also, enabling that digital transformation for the mine itself, enabling those things like the short interval control and the things you need to be competitive these days, enabling remote operations, automation of equipment. Climate change and decarbonization isn't one I hit much along the way, but that's increasingly being considered by all of our clients as part of the design of anything new that they're doing. And again, it fits with some of the above, but that drive for schedule improvement. And I'm sure I've missed a lot as I went, but that's my time there. In fact, I'm a couple minutes over, I think. So Sheldon, I'll throw it back to you there, but that's just a bit of an overview of what we've got going on.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for that, Todd. Great to explore there some of the key projects being developed in Canada, and some of the focus areas. So it's really important information for Australian suppliers. So thanks a lot for that. If we just go to the next slide, I'll now welcome back Luke and Don. We do have a couple of minutes left for some questions. So if you do have any, please pop those into the question box. I'll start with a question here, which it's addressed to you, Don, but I might come around to all of the panel to address this. So is the focus only for underground, or any guidance on exploring the buy/sell for open pit mines?
Yeah, so I would say about 65% of the tech that we support at the Underground Center is underground, but we also have a fairly large piece of land on surface. So we get a fair bit of interaction of surface mining technologies, movement of materials, etc., as well as surface mining companies coming to us to see what's going on. So yeah, it's not exclusive to underground. It would be focused, if you think of the chain, everything from exploration to extraction, be it underground or surface.
Excellent. I might extend that to Todd and Luke, just in terms of, I guess, the split between open pit and underground in Canada, and maybe, what the future looks like in that space, and what are the technologies that maybe open pit are looking for. So I might come to you first, Todd.
Yeah, so the projects I happen to highlight, I guess, are primarily, well, they're all underground, and that is a lot of what we're working on in Canada right now. But we do a lot of work with Teck Coal out in BC as well at their open pit mines in the Elk Valley there, and other places. And a lot of of course, some of the themes have different variations of them, but you see all the same things, right? Everybody's after the efficiency, the climate change, and so what decarbonization strategies can we employ? Some of the tech projects we work on are about different approaches to how they're dealing with their tailings and doing it in a better way, driving efficiency, all those things. So I don't know. I would say, Sheldon, a lot of the themes that I talked about apply as directly to open pit as they do to underground. So
excellent. And Luke, did you have anything to add on that from a Vale perspective?
Yeah, from our side, we've got deposits which are large, low grade, and so we need to get much more innovative in how we can mine that at a lower cost. And so we've got large, vast areas which we need to think differently about how we extract that. At the same time, we're getting smaller, higher grade pits, and so going from the very large to the very small, which you need smaller, more nimble, innovative. How can you charge remotely? How can you mine remotely? And so both ends of the scale, especially in Canada, what I'm seeing is where the opportunities are.
Excellent. Thanks, Luke. And I might just come back to you on this next question. So does Vale typically make decisions on technology from an asset-based perspective or across the business?
In base metals, we really focus on using technology roadmaps, has the agenda, the vision, the vision and the aspirations. How do we really tie that with a set of key needs-based initiatives? And so making sure what's that North Star, where are we, what do we need to do in what order? And so naturally that's very specific to the operation, but we look at a criteria on desirability, viability, and feasibility, and that's what we use to dictate the priorities. If it's a general infrastructure, yeah, that's definitely done on a global scale, but specifically in my world, when we sort of target specific deposits and application, that is very much customized to that asset. But the opportunity to scale up is definitely a bonus.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks for that, Luke. A quick question here for you, Don. So will there be another NORCAT exhibition next year? And is it possible to attend as a non-exhibitor to see how it works?
Yeah, short answer is we think so for next year. We're going to gather a lot of feedback from our event this year to understand what works, what doesn't, and that will inform how we do this going forward. We've tempered ideas already around doing smaller, more themed ones on specific areas of technology that are aligned to a smaller group of mining companies that might face those challenges, to enable a more in-depth focus on almost on a quarterly basis. Or we may continue to do one large event. I will say this, doing a technology exhibition in an operating mine is a lot more complicated than I initially thought, just because of the regulatory requirements. It's not a hockey arena or a football field. It's an operating mine. So we're going to learn and figure out what we do next year based on this September's event.
Fantastic. Thanks, Don. And as we're running out of time, I might just finish off with one last question here from Stephen. So he says, thanks for the presentations. Question for the panel. If we're looking for a technical support partner, what would be your suggested starting point? So I'll open that up to the panel.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. A very common question. Technical support, meaning maintaining the technology that has been sold and deployed. If that is the technical support in the true context of the definition, we're happy to help with that. There's a whole array of, I would say foreign supply service tech companies that we still encourage that you got to get here. Don't start out of the gate finding a distributor or a third-party licensee. These mining companies do want to know and trust and make sure something works. But there's a whole array of technical support partners. In fact, we're kind of, I would say facilitating, but now we're just observing a whole array of relationships of European tech companies having their technology supported by local ones in Northern Ontario in the marketplace. So we're happy to help with that, Sheldon, at a tactical level, but I don't know if my co-panelists have any other insight.
My main thing from Vale is we're now looking at ways where we can scout and screen using NORCAT and other mechanisms for that. And so it's not just a traditional procurement process looking for those startup innovative ideas. We're really looking at ways where we can incubate, accelerate, or co-develop these. And so we'll start making a few more announcements about that in the future. But as Don said, places and consortiums and areas such as NORCAT is one area for that.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for that, Luke, and thanks, Don. That's great insights. And as you mentioned there, we can connect any of those businesses to NORCAT in the follow-up to help with that technical support aspect. That does bring us to a close for today. So I'd like to thank Luke, Don, and Todd for your presentations. They all provided a great overview of what's currently happening in the Canadian mining market, and especially from a technology perspective. So we really appreciate that. Some great insights for our members. If we just go to the final slide, please. So just before we go, as I've mentioned a couple of times during the presentation, Austmine will be leading a METS delegation from Australia to Canada in late September this year. We'll be visiting mining operations, building relationships with local suppliers, and also participating in the Mining Transformed exhibition as well. So that delegation will go through Quebec, and then it will go to Ontario as well. So if you're interested, just drop me a note in follow-up and we can give you all the details for that. Once again, thanks to all our speakers today. Fantastic presentations. Thanks to everyone who's joined the webinar. And we look forward to welcoming you to the next Austmine webinar. Stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.